The adoption papers weren't supposed to exist, and the name listed on them wasn't any of ours. Hi, me name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 32 years old and I work as a social worker in Atlanta. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her small white house in Savannah. We thought we knew everything about her life. We knew she had 2 children, my mom and my uncle. We knew she was widowed at 60. We knew she volunteered at church and baked pecan pies every Sunday. What we didn't know was that she had legally adopted a child in 1989 and never told anyone. We found the papers while cleaning out her bedroom closet, tucked inside an old sewing kit, folded neatly. Official court documents stamped by the state of Georgia. Adoption finalized June 12, 1989. Adoptive parent Eleanor Grace Morgan, my grandmother. Child's name before adoption, Michael Reed. Child's name after adoption, Daniel Morgan. My heart stopped. There was no Daniel Morgan in our family. No missing uncle. No cousin. No story. Just paperwork. My mom stared at the documents in disbelief. That's impossible, she whispered. We would know, would we? Families are experts at seeing only what fits the narrative. I looked at the date again. I was 5 years old. If there had been another child in Grandma's life, I would have remembered, wouldn't I? The address listed on the adoption file wasn't Grandma's house in Savannah. It was an apartment in Macon. I had never heard of her living there. When I asked my mom about it, she frowned. She stayed with a cousin for a while after your grandfather died, she said slowly, but only for a year. That year, the same year as the adoption. The documents were real, court certified, signed by a judge. This wasn't informal fostering. This was legal, permanent, chosen. But there were no photos of a boy named Daniel, no birthday cards, no school awards in the attic, nothing. It was like he existed only on paper. I couldn't ignore it. As a social worker in Atlanta, I've handled dozens of adoption cases. You don't adopt a child casually, especially not at 54 years old. You do it because you mean it, because you commit. So where was he? We searched the house again. In the attic, inside a cardboard box labeled Christmas old, found something. A small red sweater, child-sized, and stitched into the collar were the initials DM. Daniel Morgan. My throat tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. At dinner that night, tension filled the room. My uncle was angry. Why wouldn't she tell us, he demanded. My mom looked hurt. Did she not trust us? I didn't think it was about trust. I thought it was about protection. Grandma wasn't secretive, but she was intentional. If she kept us quiet, there was a reason. The next day, I requested records from the county courthouse in Macon. As an immediate relative, I had limited access. But what I learned shifted everything. Daniel Reed had entered the foster system at age 7. Parents deceased in a car accident. No extended family willing to take him. Temporary placements for nearly a year, until Eleanor Morgan petitioned for full adoption. No mention of my mother. No involvement from my uncle. It was just her, alone, choosing him. Why didn't she bring him home to Savannah? Why didn't she introduce him to the family? The file gave one more clue. 6 months after adoption, Daniel was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. Frequent hospitalizations. Specialized treatment required in Macon. Grandma moved there temporarily for his care. That must have been the year Mom remembered. But no one knew the real reason. Then came the line that made my hands shake. Adoptive parent requests confidentiality due to family opposition. Family opposition. That meant someone knew and didn't approve. When I confronted my uncle with that detail, his face hardened. She mentioned helping some boy once, he admitted. I told her she couldn't take on that responsibility at her age. My mom gasped. You told her no? I was thinking practically, he snapped. She had no money, no support. But Grandma had always been stubborn in the quietest way. If she believed something was right, she didn't argue. She just did it. 3 weeks later, I found him. Daniel Morgan, age 44, living in Charlotte, married, 2 children, a high school history teacher, alive. I stared at his social media profile for an hour before gathering the courage to send a message. Hi, my name is Rachel Morgan. I believe we share a connection through Eleanor Grace Morgan. He responded within 10 minutes. I've been waiting for this message my whole life. My breath caught. Waiting. We arranged a phone call. His voice was calm, steady, but emotional underneath. She was my mother, he said without hesitation. Not adoptive mother. Mother. She told me she had children, he continued, but that they weren't ready to accept me. The words landed heavily. He didn't sound bitter. He sounded grateful. She saved me, he said softly, not just legally, emotionally. He told me she attended every doctor's appointment, every school recital, every graduation. She lived in Macon until he was stable enough to manage his condition independently. Then when he was 18, she returned to Savannah. She never abandoned him. She just kept her world separate. Chosen love doesn't always demand recognition. Sometimes it demands protection. When I told my mom about the call, she cried. Not from anger, from realization. She carried that alone, she whispered. Yes, she did. And she did it without applause, without validation, without approval. But there was one more piece we hadn't uncovered. Something Daniel told me quietly before ending the call. She made me promise not to reach out until after she passed. Why, I asked. She said love shouldn't compete. It should coexist. I'll tell you why. She believed introducing Daniel earlier would have fractured and what happened when he finally walked through our front door in Savannah. Because sometimes the child someone chooses in secret becomes the greatest proof of their heart. If this story is touching you, stay with me, because chosen love is still love. She didn't hide him out of shame. She hid him to protect everyone from themselves. Hi, my name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 32 years old and I work as a social worker in Atlanta. If you listen to we discovered adoption papers after my grandmother, Eleanor Grace Morgan, passed away in Savannah. The papers weren't for a child she gave away. They were for a child she secretly took in. Daniel Morgan, adopted in 1989, hidden from the family, alive, waiting, and now finally found. After our first phone call, Daniel and I spoke every evening for a week. The more he told me about Grandma, the more I realized something unsettling. We didn't know her completely. We knew the version she allowed us to see. But Daniel knew the woman who stayed awake in hospital chairs, who learned to read medical charts, who fought insurance companies for coverage. She was fierce, he told me. Soft but fierce. I smiled. That sounded exactly like her. I asked him the question that had been sitting in my chest since our first conversation. Why didn't she bring you home to Savannah? There was a pause on the line. Because your uncle told her it would tear the family apart, he said quietly. My stomach tightened. He wasn't angry when he said it, just factual. She said your family was still grieving your grandfather, that emotions were fragile. She didn't want to force acceptance. So instead, she split her life in two. One in Savannah, one in Macon. Two worlds, one heart. Daniel told me about the apartment in Macon. It was small, barely furnished, but filled with warmth. She made spaghetti every Friday, he said with a laugh. Burned the garlic half the time. That made me laugh too. Grandma never burned garlic. Not in Savannah, which meant she was still learning then. Learning for him. Adapting at 54 years old to motherhood all over again. Chosen love requires humility. It requires starting over. When Daniel turned 18 and his health stabilized, he got accepted into college in Charlotte. Grandma encouraged him to go. She told me my life shouldn't revolve around her sacrifice, he said. Sacrifice. That word lingered, because she never once described it that way to us. To us, she was just visiting a cousin that year, just helping someone from church. Never her son, never our uncle. The hardest part came when I asked him about the promise. She made me promise not to contact you until after she passed, he reminded me. Did that hurt? I asked. Yes, he admitted, but I understood. Understood what? That love shouldn't demand space by force. It should be welcomed. He told me she worried that introducing him suddenly would make him feel like an intruder, or worse, make us feel replaced. She said her biological children might think she was choosing me over them. But she wasn't choosing. She was expanding. And expansion is often misunderstood as replacement. The day Daniel agreed to visit Savannah felt surreal. My mom was nervous. My uncle was defensive. I was hopeful. We cleaned the house like we were expecting an inspection. Maybe we were. Inspection of our hearts. When he knocked on the door, time slowed. He looked nothing like us. Different hair, different build, different eyes. But when he smiled, there was Grandma. The same gentle curve, the same calm steadiness. My mom covered her mouth. You look like her, she whispered. He nodded softly. She used to say that. Dinner that night was awkward at first. Silences stretched. Glances exchanged. But Daniel didn't come with accusation. He came with gratitude. She gave me a life, he said simply. I'm not here to claim anything. I just wanted to meet you. That disarmed everyone, even my uncle, especially my uncle. Halfway through the meal, Daniel pulled out a small photo album. Pictures of Grandma at his high school graduation, at his wedding, holding his firstborn daughter. Mom gasped. She never told us. Daniel looked at her gently. She didn't want you to feel left out. The irony stung. In protecting our feelings, she unintentionally deepened the divide. But intention matters, and her intention was peace. After dinner, my uncle stepped outside with Daniel. They talked alone for nearly 20 minutes. When they came back and my uncle's eyes were red. I was wrong, he said quietly. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He had been afraid back then. Afraid of finances. Afraid of gossip. Afraid of burden. But Grandma had been braver. She saw a child without a home, and she chose him. Later that night, Daniel stood in Grandma's old bedroom. He touched the dresser, the quilt, the window she used to sit beside. She always told me she had two families, he said softly. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Neither did we. But there was still one question unanswered. Why didn't she tell us before she died? Why leave it to be discovered through paperwork? The answer came unexpectedly when I found a final letter tucked inside her Bible. It was addressed to whoever finds Daniel. I'll read that letter and tell you what she wrote about chosen love and why she believed some bonds are stronger when they aren't announced. If this story is touching your heart, stay with me, because sometimes family isn't born. The letter wasn't long, but every sentence felt like a confession wrapped in grace. Hi, my name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 32 years old and I work as a social worker in Atlanta. If you followed this story, you know that after my grandmother, Eleanor Grace Morgan, passed away in Savannah, we discovered adoption papers for a child none of us knew existed. Daniel Morgan, adopted in 1989, loved in secret, protected in silence, and now finally standing in our living room as part of us. But the final piece of this story wasn't in court records. It was in a letter. I found it tucked inside her Bible between the pages of 1 Corinthians 13, the chapter about love. It was sealed in an envelope that read, "To whoever finds Daniel." My hands trembled as I opened it. Her handwriting was steady, familiar, comforting. My dear family, if you are reading this, then Daniel has stepped into your lives. I prayed for this day, but I did not want to force it. Daniel did not replace you. He did not compete with you. He simply needed me when I had the ability to give. I had to pause, because in one paragraph she answered every unspoken fear. She continued, "When your father passed, I felt an emptiness I did not know how to carry. Grief is heavy when it has nowhere to go. Then I met a boy whose grief was heavier than mine. I could not save your father, but I could save him." Tears blurred the ink. This wasn't charity. This wasn't rebellion. It was healing. Chosen love born from loss. The next lines explained everything. "I did not tell you because I was afraid you would see it as betrayal. I did not want you to think I was replacing your father or replacing you. Love does not divide, but fear makes it feel that way." That was the truth. It wasn't secrecy rooted in shame. It was secrecy rooted in fear of misunderstanding. Daniel sat beside me as I read the rest aloud. She wrote about his first day of school, his hospital nights, the way he clung to her hand during thunderstorms. She wrote about my mom and uncle too, about how fiercely she loved them, how proud she was of the family she built. She never saw it as two separate worlds. She saw it as one heart with more rooms. Then came the final paragraph. "If you are angry, I understand. If you are confused, I understand. But please understand this above all. Daniel was not hidden because he was less. He was hidden because I wanted him to be welcomed, not tolerated. And welcome cannot be forced." The room was silent when I finished reading. No one spoke for a long time. My mom wiped her tears first. "She carried that alone," she whispered again. But this time it wasn't regret in her voice. It was respect. My uncle stared at the floor. I was afraid, he admitted. I thought she was taking on too much. Daniel looked at him gently. "She took on just enough," he said. And somehow that healed something. Over the next few months, Daniel became a natural part of our lives. I've spent my career working in child welfare in Atlanta. I've seen adoptions that were loud, messy, celebrated, and I've seen ones that were quiet, private, sacred. Grandma's was sacred. She didn't adopt Daniel to be praised. She adopted him because love presented itself, and she answered. Chosen love is powerful. It doesn't require biology. It doesn't require approval. It only requires courage. Sometimes I think about how easily this could have gone differently. If we had reacted with anger, if Daniel had arrived demanding recognition, if Grandma had told us at the wrong time. But she understood something we're only now learning. Timing shapes acceptance, and love grows best in safety. We didn't lose anything when Daniel entered our lives. We gained a brother, an uncle, a new set of stories, and a deeper understanding of the woman we thought we already knew. She wasn't divided, she was expanded, and now so are we. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that family isn't always about blood, please like and subscribe, because some of the strongest bonds in life are the ones someone chose. And sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't announced, they're discovered.